Well, to close out the service, we're going to continue on. We've been kind of on this journey that we've called LW Studios, which basically is just a way to try to describe the fact that the wisdom that we are trying to access comes in spaces that are real to life. And there's work that has to be done in the realm of wisdom, because wisdom is about skillful living. It's about insights that help us skillfully live normal everyday life. And if you're like me, I need a lot of insight, discernment, knowledge, help with living everyday normal life. Does anybody agree with that assessment? Not just of my life. You're like, yes, you do need help. But your own life, please take it personally. And so this is kind of, for the summer, we want to do something that was a little bit, we know people come in and out for, summer, and so summer's coming to a close, but we're still going to hang out in the wisdom literature for a few more weeks. And in this particular week, we want to hang out again in the heart region, which is kind of why we chose the songs we chose and why the kids' moment was aimed the way it was aimed. Because we want to think about our hearts and the kind of tone we should be setting with our hearts. So I'm pulling out my little book of wisdom here. I didn't bring my glasses up here. That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to try without it. Thank you. That's his subtle way of saying, don't resist being old, So, it's so little I can't find my spot. That's funny. Here it is. A few phrases. These are a few verses I want you just to kind of hang with. Okay? I'm not going to put them up on the screen. I just want you to sit with these. Okay? So even if you don't remember the references later, that's okay. Just kind of sit with the themes. Okay? Because they all have to do with the heart. One that you may know, pretty famous proverb, Proverbs 4:23. Watch over your heart with all diligence. Just hold that one for a second. Watch over your heart with all diligence. Proverbs 15:13. A joyful heart makes a cheerful face. That one's hard for me to say and you not smile, just so you know. It's kind of like you're being unbiblical. No, just that was a joke. It was a bad joke. Number 3, Proverbs 15:15. A cheerful heart has a continual feast. I like that one. And then Proverbs 17:22. A joyful heart is good medicine. I like that one too. So we're gonna sit with just some of the wisdom from these 4 observations about how life works. And I want to suggest they're more than just observations, but they're also counsel to us. They're kind of setting us up for some work that we need to do as humans. So we've understood from the wisdom literature, the way it works is these aren't moral mandates. This isn't you should have a happy face. Like that's not what this is about, right? It's just going to happen naturally because we read the text that way. But these are not instructions all the time in the book of Proverbs, this wisdom literature, and it's not morally mandating you do something. That's not the intention of these wisdom sayings. They're observations of life. One scholar called them pithy observations. They take observations and they pack them into this little poetic form so that you can kind of remember them and then break them out mentally or in your heart at different times in your life. And so they're meant to stop us in our tracks and cause us to ask poignant questions about our posture toward life, our attitude in life, our perception as to what matters in life, and they're like heart food for living well. And the heart is a huge part of where all these proverbs are going and where the work has to take place. And that's why I started with, above all else, guard your heart, Proverbs 4:23, for it is the wellspring of life. So we're encouraged to keep watch, keep tabs over our own hearts, because it's in the space of the heart where love and hate and anger and calm and anxiety and determination, fear and courage, doubt and belief, emotional parts of what the things you're feeling deeply, the things you're thinking about and ruminating over ideas and decisions, all this primarily takes place in the part of your person known as the what? The heart. This is how the Hebrew conception of the heart is not just your emotional space. It's the whole interior life space. So it only makes sense that whatever goes into your heart or is happening on a regular basis in your heart and what is coming out of your heart is a big deal. This, of course, is why the encouragement says, above all else, watch over your heart. Guard or protect the inner person from what's coming in and what's going out is a high priority. It's like a goalie in soccer who makes it his or her only goal to keep that ball from going in the net. They don't have much of a job, right? I mean, occasionally you'll have a goalie who you're nervous when they start kicking it. Like, have you ever seen this? Especially when you're working with kids, you know. It's like, no, don't kick because you don't know how to kick. Which is weird. You're playing soccer. That's basically the primary skill needed. But the goalie is different. All they have to do is sacrifice their body in whatever way is necessary to keep that ball from going in the net. They are literally guarding it above all else, right? And this is what the encouragement is. If the heart is such a priority for the whole flourishing of the human life, then it makes sense that above all else, we take care of it. We cultivate it. We protect it. We guard it. All the stuff going on down in there, where the candle of the Lord searches. And so Proverbs, these wisdom sayings, they have been tested and tried by generations, and these ancient collaborators are putting them together, especially King Solomon, as a resource for the cultivation, the care, and the management of the heart so it flows out so we can navigate life well. And so a lot of the Proverbs point back to the heart because that's where the work has to be done. So if we're going to live God's good way, I would encourage us to take the Proverbs like this, like that. I don't know if you guys do the little mixes in your water because water just doesn't taste really interesting. So you take your water and you pour what Liquid IV is one brand. I don't use that. I use what Jen has given me. But I pour it in because she works for the company that does it or something. So anyway, I pour this lemon lime stuff in and I drink a lot more water and I feel better because I know not only am I getting the goodness of the water and hydrating my body, but I'm also getting the electrolytes and the vitamins and everything that encourages and strengthens my whole body. And that's kind of how Proverbs works. It's supposed to be little packets that are jolts to us. Does that make sense? And so you just take one. You don't have to read the Proverbs through like from the beginning to the end. Like you take them in clusters and chunks and you, like little packets of water, you let them get down into your system and change the way you see life and the way you navigate life. And so we're going to do that with this idea of a cheerful heart. So wisdom's counsel in Proverbs 15 and 17, as it relates to our heart's overall tone, what we're shooting for in the overall vibe of our heart, our interior life, is a sense of joy or a cheerfulness. So the text I read to you, Proverbs 15:13, a joyful heart makes a cheerful face. Now, I want you to see the rest of it too. A joyful heart makes a cheerful face, but in heartache is a broken spirit. Now, what this text is doing, I think, is it's contrasting two internal ways of being. The internal way of being is a broken spirit. Now, when I say this, don't misunderstand. I'm not talking about the broken spirit that Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are those, do you remember the first one, the first beatitude? Blessed are the poor in spirit or the broken in spirit. He's talking about something different there. This broken spirit, this one translation calls it wretchedness. It's kind of like a frame of internal life that's just like angry, uptight, anxious. It's all balled up. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's contrasting a joyful heart, posture of the heart, with this heartache, this wretchedness of heart. And the author, the wisdom counsel is that we probably should cultivate a cheerful heart. And the way you can spot a cheerful heart is oftentimes on the face. Now, so understand, when I say cheerful, I feel like you think I'm just trivializing things, and I'm not. I really am not. Like, I understand the sadness, the brokenness, the confusion, the pain of my own life. Add all that to your life stories that are full of a lot of weight and sorrow. I'm not trivializing that. That's why I love yet I hate songs like Smile, Nat King Cole, right? The great. When the song comes on, inside I go, smile when your heart is aching, And doesn't that make you kind of like, yeah. But some of the words disturb me, to be honest. Like counseling you not to cry because it doesn't do any good. I'm like, no, that's not how humanity works. You can't just tell somebody who's just lost someone or something precious to them, just smile, it'll be okay. That's not how we're supposed to engage with humanity. There's a time for that. A little kid falls down, scrapes his knee, and you bring him up like, smile, it's going to be okay, and you're tickling him, But if he had broken his leg, you don't do that, right? Just smile, kid, like, no, you don't do that. So, I don't know if you guys, you probably don't remember the early 90s. There's a lady named Shanice, and she wrote a song called I Love Your Smile. I love your smile. Dun, 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 dun. You guys know this one? Jay, you know this one. Dun, 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 dun. And it's like, I love your smile. I never understood what it meant. I just liked the I love your smile kind of thing. And it was about her boyfriend, I think, in high school or something, where, she wanted to see his smile, and that let her know everything was okay. So, kind of a dumb song, but the catchy little melody there, it sticks in you, and every time you sing it, you tend to smile. There are songs that do that for you, getting a little deeper, but still, I don't know. I like the Smile by Kirk Franklin. I know Jay knows this one. I think we did it at camp. But it's called I Smile, and I love it because he at least takes it a little deeper and is acknowledging the bigger reality of what God is doing and giving us the ability to smile through hardship. He even sets the whole song up that way. So I like that better than, Nat King Cole, than Smile by Nat King Cole, because it takes into account the pain we are wrestling with a little bit more honestly. But I think there's more going on in this text than just, hey, buck up and smile, it's going to be okay, have a cheerful heart, have a joyful heart. I don't think that's what the wisdom author is saying. One scholar said it this way, that which is deep within often leaks out. I think what he's saying is that whatever you're cultivating internally will leak out to the rest of you, particularly your countenance. I don't know if you know this about people, but countenances tell a story. And I want to encourage you to not only understand your own countenance and what story you're telling with your face, but also the faces of others. I mean, this is something that, as a person who cares about people, we all should be being aware of. Like when somebody comes in our building, or when we're engaging with people in our city or at work or in our family, you can read what's going on oftentimes by just looking at their countenance. And you can see a deep sorrow or sadness or confusion, and in us that should cause us to the lights to go on. In the interior part of who they are, something's not right. Or they need comfort or care or counsel and so I would suggest to us that we learn to assess our own countenance and what it's saying, as well as others. My parents made us watch a lot of old movies when I was growing up. And I say it sound like it was a bad thing. I love old movies, but we watched a lot of the old Disney movies and there was one called Pollyanna. You guys remember Pollyanna? She was a little blonde-haired girl, really annoying. But no. The movie was supposed to be about the fact that this whole town was kind of broken in some ways, and she kind of comes and like breathes life because of her joy. And it's kind of really cool. It's a cool story. But there's one lady that I'll never forget as a child, and she was this grumpy old lady, elderly lady. The funny thing is, she wasn't even that elderly. She literally just was bemoaning her life. And so she would sit in her house with her little funny white hat on, and she would just kind of like, be snarky to everybody. And so Pollyanna comes in here with her, her happy heart, her cheerful face, and this lady can't stand her. She's like, what are you so happy about? And that's literally what she says. And Pollyanna explains where this came from. And I always thought it was interesting. Her father was a minister, and they didn't have a lot growing up. And so when things would go badly, the father would say, I want you to tell me 3 things that you're celebrating, that you're happy about today. And so she would begin to recount the blessings in her life. And she said by the time she got to the 3rd one, it had changed the whole vibe of her outlook. And so the grumpy lady's like, oh, well, she's kind of like not taking it in. But the whole point of the movie is by the time the movie's done, the whole town has been infused with this joy that this little girl has brought to this town. And even though it's a made-up story, I think it's kind of getting onto something that the Proverbs is trying to tell us. There is power in cultivating the interior life in joy. And it doesn't just affect us, it affects other people. It affects our family. It affects our partners. It affects our children. It affects our neighbors. It affects people at our work. It affects our church. It affects all of us. And so you say, well, how do I cultivate this? Well, let's go on. The next text. 17:22, a joyful heart, good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. That's one of them. I don't want to overlook one more, though, before I talk about that one. If I can find it. So I printed my notes back and forward, and I always hate when I do that, because then I always get lost. And the other one I read to you is 15:15. All the days of the afflicted are wretched, but a cheerful heart has a continual feast. So I remember as a kid, we were picking up some dude that was like a preacher dude that we were like transporting from the airport. And not lots of people make marks on my brain, but he did. He had like stark white hair, and he was short, and he got in the van that we were driving to take him wherever we were taking him. And I remember the car ride with him. Because the whole time he was like, oh, look at the birds. Oh my goodness, the weather is so nice. And he was just bubbling with joy. And I was like, what is this guy's problem? I had never met somebody so infused with joy. And it's funny because it sticks in my heart. And this, when I think about him, I think about this text. A cheerful heart has a continual feast. This is not a moral mandate. This is an observation from a sage saying, this is kind of how humans work. If there's a cultivation of joy and a cheerful spirit, it's like having a continual feast. And back in the ancient times, a feast wasn't just something you had every day. A feast was a special event. It would usually happen like at a wedding. There'd be lots of, foods and wines available. It would happen like when a treaty was made or at the end of a war. You'd have like a feast to celebrate the end of this, and now we have peace. If you had a special person you were honoring, you might have a feast. If there was like a special day, a birthday, you'd have a feast. But this is a lavish overflow of food and wine that is plenty for all. And this is what a person's heart is like that is cultivating joy. I like that feast metaphor. Because for me, a lot of times my heart feels like I'm eating at McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? It's like cold fries, a nasty little burger. What I want is like a Thanksgiving feast made with Guido's ingredients. Right? Like everything is just so on point. And there's so much available, and it's all hot at the right temperature, and you just pass the plates around. This is what our hearts are like if we are cultivating a cheerful heart. This is the observation this wisdom teacher is making. So I'm gonna give you some insights or just some ideas on how to do that. Before we do that, I just want to do the last one, and that is this joyful heart is good medicine. What's that about? But a crushed spirit dries up the bones. I think this proverb is way ahead of its time. We know biologically now that our internal state, our emotions, our mental moods, they directly, physically, physiologically affect our bodies. We know this from the scientific work. So even literally, it can be accurate to say that a broken heart can dry up the bones, can physically negatively affect our bodies. It can literally suck the life out of our physical health because the whole of who you are is interconnected. It's not just your body and your soul and your heart, and it's all connected. And so I think we know this intuitively from our experience. In the ancient times, medicine was not antibiotics, right? So when it says a joyful heart is good medicine, it's not, don't think of antibiotics, but more along the lines of herbal remedies or what would be considered natural or even supernatural responses to sickness, disease, or lack of health. It was attending to whatever wasn't right with the person. And so think more in terms of healing practices as good medicine. So a joyful heart is like healing practices internally in us. So a joyful, cheerful internal life is like living with ongoing healing practices and attending to one's life with this healing practices of joy and a cheerful disposition. So when do we need, this kind of encouragement the most? And we could do a little stop and you could just have you guys talk for a second, but I think I know what the answers would be. Difficult days in school, at work, or at home. Massachusetts winters. Am I right? Amen. Financial troubles. Medical challenges, chronic pain, sickness, disease, relational frustrations, anger, and bitterness. This is when we need some ways to cultivate joy in the interior part of who we are so that our circumstances don't crush the life out of our internal selves. So I want to give you some suggestions for how to do it. The Proverbs isn't really telling us how to do it. It's just making observations. A cheerful heart has a continual feast. So my question is, well, how do I cultivate a cheerful heart? How do I cultivate joy when everything around me is falling apart? When people aren't doing what I feel like they need to be doing. They're not meeting my needs. They're not helping. They're obstacles. How do I do this? And so let me just give you some common sense wisdom here's some ways. Number one, I would encourage you to be around more people that have cheerful hearts. People that are doing the heart work. You can tell people who are doing heart work in joy. It doesn't mean their lives are perfect. It's possible their lives are worse than yours. It's very possible. But they're doing the heart work. And you can see it on their face. You can see it on the way they carry themselves. And so if you're struggling with maintaining and cultivating a joyful, cheerful spirit, make sure you make it a priority to hang out with people who are doing this kind of work. There may not be a Pollyanna in our city, but maybe there's some versions of her who are doing the heart work. Number two, fill up your interior life with good content, material, music that vibes towards joy and goodwill. So if you're struggling with darkness and confusion, the antidote is beauty and goodness. And so fill up your heart and the spaces in your mind and your heart with good, beautiful things. That's why we're introducing our church to poetry. It's just one tool belt of beauty and goodness in our tool belt of cultivating this cheerful heart. Number 3, know the internal joy killers. Know what it is, like recognize, remember, guard your heart with all vigilance, okay? What is it that tends to squeeze the life out of the joy and the cheerful heart that you're trying to cultivate? Know what they are. And then strategize to wisely deal with the tension or the obstacles as they start to press down inside of you. Number 4, I would encourage you to pray. Pray for more wisdom and discernment and courage to cultivate a cheerful interior life, especially in difficult times. This is where we say, God, help us. Like, I am angry, I'm frustrated, I'm confused, I'm hurt. That's okay. You're a human. You need to process through those things, but you don't want to live with those realities as the dominating backdrop to your life, the interior life. It will literally dry up your bones. And then number 5, get help. If you find that you're stuck in a cycle of internal sorrow or confusion or bitterness that is keeping you from cultivating a joyful heart, if you can't get out of that dark cloud that's like around your heart and you've tried for years, then I would encourage you to get help. Open up with somebody. Be honest with somebody. Talk to a pastor, a therapist, a really close friend, somebody who's experienced the same thing you're going through, and say, how did you get out of this darkness? How did you get out of this confusion? How did you move on from what's crushing my heart? Because it is integral to humanity to cultivate a joyful spirit. And so as a church, as humans helping each other, we want to help each other cultivate and work at this heart work of a joyful spirit. Now, the interesting thing about the Proverbs, to close, is there's always layers, especially if you're thinking in terms of the whole of sacred scriptures. Proverbs tend to be a little bit more on the surface initially, right? So, there's like practical, like have a joyful heart. You can see it on your face. That's pretty, that's not, it could show up on a Hallmark card and you wouldn't think it was weird. It's not too deep. But there's actually layers here because the whole framework of the book of Proverbs is the wise person is the one who understands the gravity of God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so there's a deeper layer here that allows us to rest. Like if you're like, I can't find the way or the tools or the understanding how to cultivate this cheerful spirit. I'm falling and failing and my heart is cold and angry and bitter and I can't get out of it. Well, we have bigger resources. We have God himself, who is the one who divvies out wisdom and who works in wisdom. And so we can rest in him. That's why I say pray, because he is the one who can attend to this and help us with this. But there's even a bigger layer, because the way that God has manifested wisdom most profoundly is in a person whose name is Jesus. This is why we come on Sunday and worship, because Jesus is the very wisdom of God in flesh, on the ground. And here's the deal. Jesus was, if you look at Jesus' life, he didn't have a home a place to lay his head as he's traveling around for those 3 years of ministry. He was often disliked by people. He didn't have any money. He was supported by wealthy women. That's how he was supported. He didn't have money. He didn't have a place to call home. He was persecuted. He was often chased out because people hated him. And yet, he was the best human that ever lived, which says to me, I bet Jesus was one of the most cheerful human beings to be around. I think some of the pictures of Jesus that the movies pick, he's like this, 80s rock star with, kind of a mopey, kind of philosophical vibe. And I was like, I don't think you're missing. Jesus was a human to the fullest sense. And I think he had a continual feast internally, even in the midst of all the madness that he was living in and navigating. And so I just want to encourage you to look to Jesus, to rest in the gravity and the greatness of God. This is not in opposition to, hey, let's have deep faith. Let's have a serious kind of hope. Let's love people genuinely. This isn't an opposite of that. This is part of that. And so I want to encourage you to cultivate this week a cheerful heart and have a continual feast in the middle of all the craziness of your circumstances. Would you bow your heads and let's pray?